Panic Button. I'm Nina.
I'm Jessie. Woo, woo, woo.
Trump finally signed an executive order keeping males out of women's sports. No men in women's sports. Executive order.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how the guy who was saying grab him by the pussy, locker room talk fella, is the one who is saving women from men in the locker room and in their sports?
Well, if you think about it, if you went to the locker room, went to grab someone by the pussy, and
You would hope they have a vagina, yeah.
and you got a handful of
Why are you happy that this has gone into effect?
It brings a lot of hope to a lot of Americans that they're not going to be reprimanded for making mistakes of calling someone she when they want to go by he or whatever the case is. It brings a lot of inspiration to girls, especially the ones in collegiate sports, because they don't have to compete or undress in front of men. Deters people from doing what that fraternity had happen.
Oh,
where the man was in the fraternity and he was
walking
jerking
around
off and stuff.
Walking around with a boner.
Yeah. It stops that from being encouraged. And I am just honestly, that's why we voted for Trump to be in office. Is because that's what we wanted at the end of the day. I know he's probably going to do a couple things I disagree with when he's in office. And I came to terms with that because I really wanted no men in my locker rooms and no men competing against my future children, my future daughters at least, in sports.
I'm happy because now we don't have to worry about little girls being exposed to penises or being looked at by guys when they're naked and they have to change. We don't have to worry about them getting dominated in sports anymore or having their skulls cracked or their teeth knocked out or having concussions or paralysis. We don't have to worry about that anymore.
Which are all real things.
We don't have to but worry about them taking away opportunities from women, scholarships, money. Mm-hmm. Come on. But especially the safety factor is such a big thing. And when the Democrats were trying to defend it and saying all this bullshit, well, it's only a small portion of people anyway. It's it doesn't matter. There's a small portion of murderers. It's still something we should be fighting against, don't you think?
There's also a small portion of files, and we still don't want those around.
Exactly. Just because something is a small portion doesn't make it not important.
It also doesn't make it fair. It doesn't make it fair because only so many of the population is like this, but we're still letting them in and they have an advantage. It doesn't make it fair. It shouldn't be a thing.
And there were no guidelines in place anyway. Mm-hmm. You could just identify as a woman and then
boom,
you could
shakalaka, here I am.
But first, the men were hiding that they were even men and competing against women, like Fallon Fox. So there was another UFC fighter. I'm not sure if he hit it or not. He had the pink hair and he pretended to be a woman. And he was not only vicious in the ring, but outside of the ring, he was a complete asshole. And the one thing I noticed about all these trans women in women's sports is they're all assholes. For real. None of them realize that, they all think that they deserve it and that if they earn it, then women just have to shut up about it and compete harder. We've been hearing that for years from the left, that we just need to work harder. Suck it up. You're going to lose when you compete in sports.
Sorry. Mm-hmm. That's why we got the whole Title IX thing to begin with, right? Because we could work harder to achieve what they were achieving, right? Because that's why we got it to begin with. That's why I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to jump out of your sentence, but because we could just work to the level of a man, especially in physical activities. That's just, they could do that. No, that's not true. And that's why they have division of women's and men's sports.
I have a feeling that a lot of these trans women who have been competing against women in sports, all of them hate women.
They have to.
With a passion. Because if you like women and you respect them, you wouldn't do this to them.
No.
But if you're a vain, narcissistic hat or diarrhea-filled human being, person, then you're going to be cool with all this stuff. You're going to be cool with it, and you're going to try to manipulate the women into thinking that you deserve to be there, you earned it, and there's no difference between the two of you.
So, oops, you saw my penis. What are you going to do?
And oops, I won. Again.
Look at my penis one more time as I walk out.
Trump, when he was signing the executive order, he brought up that there was a long-distance biking competition. I don't know the name for it, but the man who was pretending to be a woman won first place 5 hours ahead of the other women.
That's insane.
And these men are on And Trevor Noah talking about how they don't have an advantage and they're biologically female and there's no proof. It's like, who are you? I know you're fooling the retards on the left. I get it. They're stupid. No one ever said actors were intelligent or comedians. No offense, comedians and some actors. But for the most part, it seems like if you are on the left and you are in the entertainment business, you're using, 2% of your brain? Maybe less? And the other part of your brain is just on autopilot following everyone else. So,
Yeah.
anyway, I want to react to this video because I don't think it aged very well. And it's just another reminder of why Trump won. Now, I've been hearing, before I play this clip, I just want to say that I've been hearing the Democrats say how this issue is not why Trump got elected, not why people voted for Trump. And I would like to say that that's a bunch of bullshit.
I'm going to say from the top, because I've noticed this happens in every conversation. Every time you bring up trans rights, or if you have a discussion and you say trans, people tense up. I understand why.
Why is because when anyone says trans people, when we're referring to trans, it is always 100% of the time men. That's what we're talking about.
Usually.
Trans men aren't a threat to society. They're not a threat to men. They're not a threat to women. They're not a threat. They're not even a threat to gay guys. They're just annoying. So we're talking about men.
In a world where now there are people who are so transphobic that it makes it almost impossible for people who aren't to ask any questions, to have any conversations, to have any discourse that doesn't...
You're labeling us transphobic, but saying that people who aren't transphobic are going to ask the questions. But if we ask the questions, we're labeled transphobic. It's a vicious cycle. It's a snake eating its own tail. You see it? Do you see it?
What I'm seeing...
Did you hear it? Did you see it?
What I'm hearing is he's saying that people who are transphobic, so people that don't believe in this ideology...
Are so scary.
Don't want to have the conversation about it. But what I have been seeing for the past 8 years is anyone who believes in this ideology refuses to have a conversation. They'll shut it down immediately or try to have you canceled.
It sounds like what he's saying is they're so scary, the transphobes, that now we can't even bother having the conversations because they're so out to get us.
We've been trying to have the conversation. They don't want to have it because they don't have a good argument for their side. Mm-hmm. So this is another just gaslighting thing that people eventually saw through.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really glad that you're joining us on the show to talk about this because it feels like one of the biggest issues in America, and yet no one can seem to talk about it. So let's start with your journey. You competed at some of the highest levels in sports. And as your hoodie says, sport is a human right. That is what you believe in. Talk me through...
Hey, is sport a human right? Last I checked, healthcare ain't even a human right. What he means to say is women's sports are a human right.
Women's sports are a man's right.
Women's bodies are a man's right.
Ding.
I bet you. Bet you any money. See, I think that's another reason why they hate the right so much, because there is part of the right that
calls them out on their BS.
But also that they agree with.
Yeah.
Those really because they're like they're both parts of the extreme.
Yeah, they go so far left that they end up on the right.
The far right. Yeah.
Talk me through just a little bit of why you believe fighting for transgender athletes to compete in the categories they'd like to in sport is so important.
So it's a fundamental...
They'd like to.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
I'm sorry, if I'm 500 pounds, I'm not going to be boxing in bantamweight just because I'd like to. It's based on their logic, because they have no logic. Their logic is cuckoo.
Tenet of the Olympic movement that sport is a human right. So in their Olympic charter, in their fourth fundamental principle of Olympism, they say participation in sport is a human right, and they mean that at the competitive level. So this issue, people like to say that it's a complicated issue, and I don't actually think it is. I think it's very simple. It all boils down to men stay in men's sports and women stay in women's sports, and there's no such thing as a gender that switches back and forth. There's no such thing as changing your gender, changing your sex, none of that
Make a third league if you want, but that's your option.
Yeah, but because they push so hard to be in women's spaces and women's sports, it only proved to me even more that they don't like women and they want to dominate them in any way that they can. If it's not in the bedroom, then it's got to be in sports or in the bathroom.
And now Donald Trump is making it so you don't have that chance.
It down to, do you actually think that trans women and intersex women are real women and are really female or not? And if you do, it's very simple. Just stop policing who counts as a real woman, because this has had history of racism built into it over the years.
Love how they always go back to race, don't you? When they can't defend themselves, you know what? Throw in black people. That sounds fucking racist to me.
Yep.
It's not an accident that the intersex athletes who get singled out are women of color from the global south, because who gets singled out for scrutiny?
Oh, let's keep going.
Out for scrutiny is based on white women's conceptions of femininity.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have to stop. I have to stop. You are a white guy. You are the epitome of privilege.
You put on some glasses and a wig and you're good to go, right?
Now you have a privilege that's higher than white men because white men scooch down a level. Mm-hmm. Now white trans women, aka white men, are above white men. It's like Donald Trump didn't win because of this. No, you keep fooling yourself because this is great for us because we can get rid of all of you psychopaths at one point or another. If you're gonna keep doing this shit, you're gonna be nasty. You're gonna be volatile. You're gonna call for death on some people. Because I have been seeing that come around.
I'm sure. It happened when he got shot in the ear, too, remember?
Yeah, you're gonna gaslight people. You're gonna tell them what to do. And you think for a second that the American people are that stupid. Now, you might have a point with maybe 20% are that stupid, or maybe 30. But after a while, people just get sick of this. There is a breaking point for everyone.
That's why we had the executive order signed.
And that's being weaponized against trans people too. So it's a fear of protecting the fragile, weak, cis white woman from the rest of us.
Because the whole Me Too thing was when white men became bad. But now you're mad that they're trying to defend regular women from men who are pretending to be women. You're really mad about that? But that was the whole point. The
women that he's thinking are weak and frail are the same women that threw his ass back in male sports. Mm-hmm. Where he can continue to lose. So,
good luck out there, bud.
Have fun.
So there are many elements to what you've said, which I appreciate. So let's try to break them down.
Do you see him next to Trevor Noah? He is a giant.
Yeah.
A giant.
Yep.
Next to a man. Mm-hmm. Could you imagine him next to a woman?
Even bigger.
One thing that confuses me personally is it seems like we have discussions about who should participate in which category and how. You know, on the face of it, it seems simple, as you say. You know, if somebody identifies as a woman, if they're transgender, they can compete against women who are born biologically, and then if not, they're not. But then there are many who would argue, who are not transphobes. There are many who born biologically women who will say, but you have an unnatural advantage over me, and that makes the sport unfair. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, there's lots of ways you can respond to that. So the first is the very language of you were born and I'm not biological somehow, like I don't think I'm a cyborg. So like this idea that like, oh, you're not a biological woman. Well, I am a woman, that's a fact.
You've had extra unnecessary hormonal replacement therapy. Therefore, your biology has been altered. No one said you're a cyborg. You don't have metal in your leg, that's not what we're saying. We literally are referring to the fact that you take cross-sex hormones that are not naturally occurring, that is not something you can just eat, that is not something you can just find somewhere in nature. That's what you're doing. That is not natural. That is not biologically occurring.
It's really simple. For this tiny man's brain, I'll make it simple. When you come out of the womb, that's what we mean by biologically female. She came out of the womb as a female. That's what we're trying to get to.
Could you do this 2,000 years ago?
You don't just create a woman. She's born.
Mm-hmm. Could you have replaced your hormones 2,000 years ago?
No.
Exactly. That's my point. This is a thing that is a modern technological advantage. It is not a cyborg material, but you are doing something that is not naturally occurring. No matter what plants you eat, you're not going to have this happen. No matter, like, you might have some, like, whatever causes the, like, intersex actual thing to happen. You might have some, like, ambiguous genitals, and there's definitely situations where that has happened. But outside of that, there's literally nothing that makes it so you produce cross-sex hormones naturally. This is not natural.
Right. It's as natural as a tit job.
Yes.
It's like saying that the big breasts I have now, I was born with them. They're biologically me. No, that's not how that works. You got to be really stupid to actually buy into this.
To bite this, yeah.
Or you have to be easily manipulated and very lost. And people like this are prime examples of people who will target weak people like this because they're looking for people to follow them.
They start off with, okay, what about the women that think you have a biological advantage? And they're like, you think that this is not this isn't just biological? Like, no, that we didn't say that. We said you have a biological advantage. No one said you're not human.
Because you came out of the womb a male.
female, right? And I'm pretty sure I made biological stuff. So I'm a biological female as well. So this question of do trans women have an advantage over cis women? We don't know. In fact, there's basically no published research on this question. However, there's good reason to think that there isn't, but I think it's irrelevant.
It's been proven that unless they started transitioning at like 12 years old, they have bigger bone density, bigger lungs, larger muscles. There's a lot of proof behind it. Even though this is 2 years ago, we now have a lot of answers. So yes, we do know. And yes, they have an advantage. And yes, we want them out.
What's funny is that they want trans women in women's sports, but they also want children to transition. But if children transition, there's no way their bones are going to be able to handle any kind of sport. So it's not about trans people. It's about them, specifically them as individuals and what they can get.
Relevant because we allow all kinds of competitive advantages within women's sport. So one example I'd love to talk about is the 2016 Rio Olympic women's high jump final. First place was over 6'3", 10th place was 5'5". So a 10.5-inch height difference between first and 10th at the Olympics in high jump.
Right.
And we call that fair.
Okay.
So the range of body types with
Yeah, it is, because they had to go through so many competitions, so many matches in order to get to that point. What about those super tall basketball players that tower over the other basketball players? That's still fair. We also have weight classes for a reason, and we have age classes for a reason. You know what I mean? But they don't want you thinking too much. They just want to bullshit you enough to buy into it.
of body types within the female category is way, way bigger than anything that could be attributed to trans women. So if there's an advantage, and I'm not saying that there is, for trans women in women's sport, it's not an unfair advantage. But also, we've been trying to compete at the highest level for decades. We've been allowed to compete for decades.
There actually is a lot to be said about the advantage in having bigger muscles, bigger lung capacity, bigger feet, bigger hands, especially when it comes to competitive sports. There's a lot to be said. Let's say women, they have their natural occurring heights. You guys are, as males, have a slightly higher occurring natural rate, right? I'd say on average. And to say that that is fair against that 5'3" woman is crazy. The 5'3" versus the 6'1" woman. Now that, yes, it's a height difference, but they're both biological women. The Swedish woman versus the poor little Hispanic woman, it's still fair because they both competed, like you said, to get to that place. And they're both biologically women. So that 5'3" motherfucker worked really hard to get to the same level as that 6'1" motherfucker. But they're also both women, so there's still a fair chance.
Also, when we're listening to arguments like this, we also have to take into consideration the person that's making the argument. This man, since he became a woman, has been dominating women's sports since he started. So why am I going to take into consideration his argument if I know that he's pushing this argument because he benefits directly?
I'm not cheating. I'm just really good at this.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing, yeah.
Then why did you suck in men's sports? Anyway, like and subscribe to this video, join our memberships, comment below, share this with a friend, and
Share it with a foe.
have a good day.
Time